when you're bootstrapped and you don't have the money to spend, you just can't spend it. So you're forced to focus on the actual innovation. 1, 2, 3.
Coming up on the Modern Acre, we're welcoming back Chris Laudando of Laudando and Associates, talking AgTech and Contrarian views in agriculture.
The Modern Acre is the podcast for builders in ag who think differently. If you'd like to join our membership community, check out the Modern Acre Co-op.
The Modern Acre is presented by Corteva Agriscience. Corteva combines industry-leading innovations, high-touch customer engagement, and operational execution to profitably deliver solutions for the world's most pressing agriculture challenges. Corteva generates advantaged market preference through its unique distribution strategy, together with its balanced and globally diverse mix of seed, crop protection, and digital products and services. With some of the most recognized brands in agriculture and a technology pipeline well-positioned to drive growth, the company is committed to maximizing productivity for farmers while working with stakeholders throughout the food system as it fulfills its promise to enrich the lives of those who produce and those who consume, ensuring progress for generations to come.
All right, Tim, we got to do a quick check-in on you. How's the new baby? How's the family? How are you feeling?
New baby is doing good. We're 2 weeks in, so I'm starting to see the fog is starting to lift. I'm getting a few sleepless nights early on, but starting to get into the rhythm, the routine of having 2 kids. I'm like much more on Mason duty, working with our toddler in the mornings to get her up and running. But it's been good and super awesome having 2 girls.
We got to see each other last week, which was awesome. Meet Hunter and get the girls together. We now have four daughters between us. So there's some serious ratio disadvantages for us guys.
Yeah, the girl gang is growing. It's crazy in our house. Definitely outnumbered. So my garage is like my one, like the man cave, as they call it, my one place of peace and quiet where I can put up my own art and work out and get everything done in the garage being a girl dad.
Totally. I don't know if I even have that to myself because usually when I'm working out, it's like the girls are doing coloring while I'm working out or something. But cool, guys. Well, great conversation this week. It's great timing, Tim, with FIRA. Tim is most likely going to be at FIRA, so reach out to him, say hi, connect. I think our dad is going to be there too. I'm not going to make the trip this go around, Tim, but it'll be exciting to see all the latest and greatest in robotics at FIRA. We'll have to do a takeaway episode, Tim, to see what you thought there. But Chris is in the ag robotics space. Previously worked at Motivo. We had him on years ago when he was at Motivo, had sold his company Robodondo to Motivo, helped them kind of with their electrification platform, and now is running his own firm, Laudando and Associates. And Chris is a contrarian thinker, and we need more of that. He posts a lot of his opinions and thoughts and takes on LinkedIn, and he has a lot to say about venture capital versus bootstrapping and how the industry is going and what's working, what's not, and how he is focused on building out Laudando and Associates in particular, focus on kind of modular technical development with their L and Azer and perception platform. So there's a ton in here. Tim, I think I said during the call, sometimes you just got to let a guest cook. And Chris was cooking this episode.
Yeah, this is a super fun one. Let's jump in with what's top of mind for Chris.
I think primarily the never-ending saga that is the bootstrapped business and juggling 3 facets, because that's what L&A is comprised of. So managing non-recurring engineering, which is extraordinarily tough in and of itself, and then simultaneously building a low-level perception brand that encompasses hardware and software that also expands, and then simultaneously your holy grail, which is our laser weeding technology, the L&Azer. That's really, really challenging with such a small team. And so I'm constantly scheming and pondering on and working to efficiently crawl forward no matter what, so that I don't have to give up any control of something that's so special.
Super cool. It has been a while since we chatted. Fill us in. Like, give us the story. When we talked to you, you were at Motivo. It's been quite a journey. We've dealt with COVID, dealt with a ton of stuff in the market, farm economy. Fill us in on Laudando and Associates.
the story of how I got here since we last spoke was rooted in building the entire AgTech business unit for Motivo Engineering after they acquired my first company, Robodondo, and did a whole number of complex AgTech hardware developments for systems that plant bare root transplanters, plug transplanters, weeding technologies, harvesting technologies, processing technologies. And then I, did all of the early market research for what would become Monarch Tractor, even interviewed their president and taught their CEO and CTO a lot about this space. Motivo had zero business in ag tech prior to that. And so, I took that as far as I could. And when Monarch was getting spun out and Motivo became very stretched thin, the timing was right to spool off and work with Jeff Annell and Steven Snyder to create Stout. And so we created Stout, founded that, and poured my entire life, blood, sweat, and tears into manifesting this and taking that responsibility of, a pile of money from a major grower and making sure that I was responsible to seeing that through to a good end. At the same time, I got married, had my first kid, and my first kid arrived a week after I was departed from Stout. That was an interesting time because, of course, I didn't let my wife know about the situation. And for 5 weeks, pondered on how I would create my going forward strategy. And that was the nexus of Laudando and Associates. Found a guy on LinkedIn who was telling the radical truth of his experience in a communist country and was saying things that were, I guess, considered taboo here in the States. And so he was effectively unemployable, but had walked away from a PhD program in Russia as seeking political asylum here. And so, it was just the right circumstance for him to stop washing dishes in San Francisco and get back to what he did best, and me to start anew with the worn out tools, as Kipling's If talks about. And so from there, worked project over project, non-recurring engineering, quid pro quo, give us cash, we'll build it for you and assign the IP to you. And built the team that way organically, moved away from the Monterey Bay, where I was living with my wife and kid, and out to Chico, where one of my biggest clients was for early on with Laudando and Associates. And that's just important, right? You can't do this complex deep tech hardware development without being in the trenches with your client. And so there was an absolute must, even though my wife was very disappointed leaving Carmel for Chico. Nothing wrong with the city of Chico, but I think this is our 45th, 50th day over 100 degrees this year, and it's tough to bring the crops in out back in our R&D plot. So that always proves a challenge. But to suffice it to say, we have worked very hard to do this the bootstrapped way, and it's been a real challenge to manifest it. But it's so precious, and the team that we've honed and built is extraordinarily special, and there's absolutely zero replacement for that whatsoever in business. And I think, you asked me earlier, front of mind, the way that venture capital, private equity deploys their money into this space has to change, and the conventional wisdom of what works and what doesn't is undergoing a massive overhaul. And I'd like to think that the work that we're doing is setting the table for what that should look like. I think self-qualified businesses that are generating a revenue. And that's so foreign to this entire space that they just don't even know how to approach it, right? So our revenues in 2022 were $1.2 million, and then we grew 30% year over year. Last year was $1.65 million. And when we had early on started to explore these venture capital conversations and were offered, verbal term sheets, it just did not compute with people that we could suddenly somehow have a debt-free business that was making a profit. The only thing they could think of was, you need to carve off the LNAs or IP into a separate Delaware C Corp so that we can end up controlling it. And we don't value anything else that you're doing. They don't value Agception, which shortly ought to be a part of breeding all of the U.S. supply of corn and soybeans. I think that's my prediction. That's our goal, is to get our technology, our artificial intelligence doing that. And that's not a small achievement. And so when these term sheets were coming in early and it's like, yeah, sure, we'll give you $1 million for 40% of your business. You're like, hang on a second. We made over $1 million last year. We're not a loss making enterprise. It's been really interesting. You know, it leaves you frustrated. It leaves you flummoxed. It leaves you thinking that there's a conspiracy against you. But I think the simple reality is that everyone's smelling their own farts in that sphere. And a lot of these talking heads get together and they've got this conventional wisdom and they want to be pundits. But the reality is, parroting the same messaging and theories and talking about problems it's not visionary, right? And agriculture needs visionary people to creatively disrupt it. And that's what we work to do. And so when people ask me, well, what's your sales strategy? It's very simple. Create something that's so radically different and offers a top or bottom line step change that people can't not have it. And so it's all inbound, right? And so, of course, it's a very efficient thing to do, but that's just one of the many things I think that we focus on. And if what we're working on doesn't pass that litmus test, if it's not desired by end users, if they're not clamoring for this type of solution, you're not working on the right thing. And no amount of investment that you'll get is going to change that fact, right? If you want to try to do an 11 out of 10 hard problem technically, like use LiDAR to look and find the bed height of a processed tomato bed when it's fully developed and you can't see the bed, well, that's preposterous, right? But yet you see dollars that have gone towards that type of thing. And then financially, of course, the viability of a lot of this stuff, you have to check that box too. And that's really where you should be checking the box. And that's what our laser technology does or promises to do. And when you juggle all this stuff, you have this challenge of you can't fail. You can't make any mistakes, because if you make a mistake on the non-recurring engineering work, the promises you've made to the clients you have, they're paying your bills, then that means that all of the fat that you had there to divert into IRAD is now non-accessible. And so you have to stop that work. You can't allocate that limited bandwidth to advancing the laser, to advancing the greenhouse system, to advancing all these different types of low-level perception tools that we want. So it's something that does keep me up at night, but I'm a fighter and I absolutely love every second of it too. So it's a blessing and a curse, as they say.
Man, what an awesome journey you've been on the past 6 or so years since we talked to you last. There's a million questions I have, but would love to kind of dig into kind of what you described of like bootstrapping a business versus kind of the venture capital route. There's been a ton of hype in like ag robotics, and it's like from a grower's perspective, being growers ourselves, like I would love to have a laser weeder that I could deploy on our acreage, and like commercialization has just been like super slow, where we go to kind of the field days and demo days, and it's like one crop in this manicured field that's not kind of real life conditions. And so like the promise that's been there for the past couple of years, like we're not seeing it like realized on farm. So I'd love to have you kind of dig into kind of the venture capital route versus bootstrapping and where we're at in commercialization.
Yeah, you've caused reciprocal floods of questions and thoughts in my head, so much to touch on. You know, when you're bootstrapped, you're forced to focus on the core technology piece. And so we made a decision going into Farm Show this year that we would go to market with the LNAser as a module. And that allowed us to focus the limited bandwidth that we did have into getting that to a technology readiness level, as they say, of 7 at least. And at this point in time, we're on the beta plus version of the module, 4 years of development into the thing. And so, we're agnostic to whether it's on a toolbar or a robot. And you've seen a lot of our peers that are making hardware tech automation systems spin their wheels trying to, make a robot and then say, hey, this is what it's going to be. And it's going to be a robot as a service model and all this sort of rigmarole that we've gone through for the last 5 years. When you're bootstrapped and you don't have the money to spend, you just can't spend it. So you're forced to focus on the actual innovation. And I was commenting recently on a McKinsey article from 2 years ago about the pending capital drought in the space, which turned out to be quite a drought. But you have seen, interestingly, that last year, the one little uptick that did happen was in this specific space of the robotics, right? So the guys making robots that are doing planting, cultivating, weeding, and harvesting. And so what I think is happening in large part is just human nature. where you spend, Americans, right? Consumer economy. We're so good and ingrained and indoctrinated to spend dollars. It soothes us. And so if you have a pile of cash, that's the human nature side of it, I think, that takes hold. And you see this sort of like feeling good and everything's fine and no urgencies there is overall with these companies. And then until that runway is about to end, right? And you're 3 months away from it. And then everyone scrambles and you burn out your engineers working 80 to 100-hour weeks. And then finally the check clears and everybody breathes a collective sigh of relief and they go back to the status quo, and it's just disgusting. And so you really look at the overall thing and you'd say, for that cycle of 500 days, maybe only 20 or 30% of it, I would say, would be in earnest, balls to the wall, doing your very best. LNA doesn't have a choice but to do our very best every single day. and that sounds cliche, but it's just true. And you would believe me because you can't persist at bootstrap doing what we're doing for 4 years without that being true. So going to market with a module opened up the ways in. So AgTech peers suddenly became a path forward, meaning that we could come up with combined embodiments, which I think is the future of this space, right? I think that a Verdant Robotics, laminar flow gimbal squirt gun that's ultra precision, applying very special doses of printer ink levels of expense, biologicals onto plants, and then lasers coming through and either supplementing or catalyzing, beneficial reactions as well. Like there's so much here that people think about lasers and like, oh, weeding, killing things. Like that's so short-sighted. The goal with lasers is to make them ubiquitous and achieve economy of scale across all of agriculture. And then you can start further developing their use for beneficial means and applications. And I'm excited about research out of China with carbon nanodots and catalyzing these reactions with citric acid solutions that you spray and getting 50% yield bumps in lettuce. And like, no one's talking about that because this circle of people is sniffing their own farts. And it's really ridiculous because we know how to do it, but it doesn't happen. And I, of course, have a theory as to why. And, I noticed yesterday another $1 million being granted to a company with a total addressable market that's so much smaller than the LNAs are. And it's by a consortium group for a specific commodity, specialty commodity. And, I think at the end of the day, they do this because there's a chance at control. And even though a lot of these things have been attempted before and they fail, they're still enticed to throw these dollars into it because the VC mindset of all I need is 1 in 100. It's all I need. And so if they hold paramount the desire to retain or usurp or capture control, and then they're fine committing dollars to it. And if they see something that's a slam dunk and creatively disruptive in the literal sense, according to Joseph Schumpeter, the guy that coined the term, and entrepreneurism, by the way, you would find that they're so averse, and even the smallest investment that they could make doesn't come. And the excuses are always quite interesting because they're all red herrings, and obviously so. But at the end of the day, that's why that's very important for a VC in term sheet to say, hey, here's $1 million for 40% of your business, and surely you're going to need more money, and that's the point at which I'll have it. And so, it's very off-putting to me, and that premise is just wrong. And the big elephant in the room here is that specialty crops, by and large, are quite wealthy. And when we started talking 6-8 years ago, we were at the Forbes AgTech Summit, and we were all talking about, labor scarcity. That wasn't true. It didn't turn out to really be as dire as everybody said it was. And I'll stop short of saying it was pure lip service. But the simple fact of the matter is that the big growers in specialty, they're going to get the best of the labor that's there. They may have a cost of labor issue. They may say it sucks that we're spending this amount of money, if the average weeding cost per acre is going up. But if you look at the dollars that you're getting at market for these crops, and then, the dollars in, that's still more of a pleasure tomorrow kind of a benefit to these guys. And the hierarchy of making any big purchasing decision is pain today, pain tomorrow, and then pleasure today and pleasure tomorrow. And pleasure tomorrow that's the last reason that someone would want to do something. And that's a big deal. And so you see, Kinsey, MoFo, there's your Future of Farming Retreat in Salinas, and there's always these events. There's Forbes, there's FIRA, there's all of these things. And it's, in a large part, a lot of the same group of people, but you're not really like moving the needle here. And what we've found as a business that just has to go in the direction of where the dollars are coming from on the NRE front, it's the Midwest. It's where I'm from. And it's the mega crops. It's corn, it's soybeans, it's, there's wheat, rice even. I mean, that's still specialty. And I'm particularly excited about that because our laser technology goes right through water. And so, 500,000 acres of sushi rice that we grow here in the Sacramento Valley of California, like it's 5 acre feet per acre of water per year. What if we cut that in half? But, Gavin Newsom hasn't come running yet to say, oh, goodness me, I would love to support this and run on that platform, right? California is also such a paradox, right? Because it's the number one state for technology, the number one state for agriculture, and yet probably one of the worst states that you'd want to try to attempt agriculture technology as your endeavor because of those reasons that are human reasons, that are controlling reasons. Because again, you have all that money. I'm not pointing any particular grower out here, but all the big names that you see in the Salinas Valley, and they would love to be able to get control of a technology and use that as a means to expand their empire. You're seeing that happen. That's clearly going on. And so I just think that the elephant in the room again is that no one's calling the spade, as they say, right? Like, why? And that's what I try to do. And I think that I have an impassioned following because I can tell radical truth because I'm not beholden to anyone. I don't have dollars from anybody. And I've already been cast away and chewed up and spit out multiple times. And that's fine.
We recently updated the kind of tagline of the podcast as the Modern Acre is the podcast for builders in ag that think differently. And I think you fit that perfectly. I love hearing you talk about this, and it gets me super fired up. And I love hearing people that have strong opinions and will call a spade a spade. And yeah, the bootstrapped versus venture capital thing resonated a ton. I want to move into your business model. You have this non-recurring engineering piece, and then I just think it's really savvy how you've honed in on these certain areas of technology that can be deployed with partners in the AgTech community. I think it's like, this is maybe not the sexiest thing from the outside, but is super savvy, right? To focus on some of this core technology. The Elenazer is such a great name. I'm fully behind it. It might take a second for me to say it, but I'm fully behind the name. It's perfect. So talk to us a little bit about, Chris, about like the evolution of the business. You're doing non-recurring engineering work. And then like, how did you come to this? Like, hey, we're going to do our own laser tech and partner with other ad tech companies that are looking at this space. And then we can kind of dig into the technology itself and its efficacy.
Well, I've said for a long time, ever since Motivo days, that all these big tech brains that are working on the hard tech problems, like autonomy, for example, really that's been the big one. They're missing the mark with where that ROI is coming from, right? And you guys know it's not going to come from getting rid of your best guy that you would trust with $1 million piece of equipment. Right? That doesn't make any sense. So really, it is the unsexy stuff, and it's using those same tech tools and applying them to the things that have the ROI. And so I've always envisioned for a brand, and that's why we have Agception, Agriculture Perception, the brand, and we've just built out, open source detection tools that we then enhance and, effectively a COTS plus type thing. And then fortunately, we've gotten into developing our own models as well, but it's all low level subjective stuff, right? And at its core, all these automation robotics are just perception action loops. So if you can being clever is to just find perception applications that have an ROI, and you don't have to worry about the extra challenge of integrating or developing the hardware piece that is the robot with the gizmo, right? So we did that and embedded ourselves with the growers and extract those insights. And I've been doing that very successfully because of my, blue collar Rust Belt industrial automation, food production background. I understand what legacy industries their expectations are, and Silicon Valley misses that by a mile. And so being able to bridge that has been very special. And I've worked and fought towards increasingly larger NRE contracts where we're entrusted with bigger responsibilities, and you play leapfrog with that. And in the process, you work and negotiate to try to end up controlling IP that you're a part of creating on behalf of your client. And when you do that and you win that opportunity, you have a very special chance, because therein lies the potential end user licensing agreement for recurring revenues, the holy grail, right?
How do you get people to agree to that? Because I mean, I think this is like the conflict.
You have to create something that's so radically different and important that the inbound interest comes from everywhere and it's demanded by everyone. Mm-hmm. And in the case of the cornoscope, for example, and it took many times, right? Like the greenhouse module didn't catch fire because just replacing the labor that's doing spot counts in a greenhouse and then using statistical extrapolation techniques to come up with how many plants have germinated for your transplanting operation, right? Like it wasn't in demand enough because either the ROI wasn't so obscene. But in the case of the cornoscopes, we're able to report on trait expressions that are the result of environmental factors, and now we have the ability, these data science teams at the big agri-industrial companies, they allocate their teams towards phenomics and tying together all of these physical traits that are expressed in these varied environments to the genotypes. And that's such an exciting Wild West space to be a part of, because our knowledge of sensors, and not just commercially available sensors, but bare metal from scratch PCB and component level stuff, we're doing that, right? We've invented line scan sensors for optical sortation systems that have helped unencumber our clients of 8-figure a year leasing agreements from decade-old incumbents providing the existing technology. So you have to be disruptive with every single thing that you do, and we've just leapfrogged it to earn the potential to the recurring revenue. And we were very fortunate to have, or what I should say is, found or realized that there are players in this game in agriculture and in agriculture technology that do sincerely have an altruistic stewardship responsibility to the game, right? And it just so happens that so far our experience has been it's in the big crops. And so the patronage of companies like Beck's Hybrids, which is such a special company, and they're really a smaller player in the overall seed breeding realm, but they're big enough and independent, and they're so nimble and they're so smart, and you look at what they're able to accomplish. And I just think that forging relationships with similar types of companies with similar cultures, the combinatorics of their special nature and our special nature combined to create, really disruptive stuff. And that's not something that comes overnight, and it just comes from impassioned people focusing on the thing. Very smart guy I know that's advisor at times, just super interesting dude, did the entire Dragon space capsule avionics package and Waymo self-driving cars, and really accomplished brain, like creme de la creme mind. And he's like, Chris, why on earth do you stay in the AgTech space? It doesn't seem like they like you or that they want you to be successful. And I'm like, well, therein lies our difference, my friend, because I cannot help but help the uphill both ways people that keep the world turning, because that's who I am, right? I'm not the lucky sperm that was born in Menlo Park. That's not who I am. And I like the responsibility, and I don't know whose expression it is, but the guys that talk about planting trees that'll be there long after you're gone. Don't get me wrong, I want generational wealth for my family, and that's I think fair if you're really doing something so special. But I don't want to give it up, right? This is my vision, and all of these pieces together are important to the story. And if we've gotten this far, I think it's Laudando and Associates for a reason. So I want to see us continue to play that part of this phenotyping, aggregation, and collating to genotypes. I want to be a part of accelerating the development of new varieties and products. I mean, product development is where I came from, right? So in Chicago, in the food processing world, I was selling capital equipment, but I was selling full line systems. And so I was working with the developers of foodstuffs, whether they're bakery, confectionery, protein, seafood, ready meals, you name it. And I was involved in like the Starbucks cake pop, for example. Like I was the first one to figure out a process to do that. And the first guy that ever went out and marketed that in one of their regions worked with me. And that's fun, right? You have this need and you see an opportunity and you're like, okay, how can we use all these chess pieces? And in our case, that's hardware and enabling hardware technology and marry it all together to create this really disruptive step change. So that's the game we're playing.
You're getting me all fired up just listening to you talk about your passion for the business. So cool to see a leader that's like just so invested, ownership of the business, just leading by example is super cool to see, where sometimes you talk to these companies where there's just multiple levels of middle management and kind of the messaging gets lost. So it's cool to see you kind of leading the tone for the entire team. You alluded to it a little bit, Chris, but maybe just talk about kind of the immediate near-term strategy, like what you're looking to do in the next few months. At more macro level, like what does an exit look like? What are you looking for long-term success of the business?
So the big realms, as far as I'm concerned, are biologicals, seed traits, perception, the low-level perception that we're doing with the Agception, the automation robotics, which is what we're doing with the laser, and then soil health. And so I really focusing on what we do best, which is the perception and the laser hardware, those core technologies, being lean, being clever, and trying things that others haven't done yet. Without giving too much away, we're looking at deploying the LNAser internationally before we deploy it commercially here in the States. That's very unorthodox. That's important to us. I think it's important strategically to get ahead of the proof of principle technology that's out there. We have a plan to simultaneously deploy here with a service. Looking downstairs right now in our shop at Kyle, working on upgrading the electrical system of the robot. It's our 40-inch wide carrot machine. So going out there, and I don't care, like fine, $200 an acre, whatever, I'm going to prove it to you. The patronage isn't there, and I think purposefully so. And so I'm just there to show it off and prove it. But we want to leapfrog specialty and bring our architecture into broadacre crops because we're the only ones that can do that. And that allows us to position our technology as a chemical-free, no-till solution to herbicide resistance, which is really quite powerful if you think about it, because there's a total addressable market for laser weeding today for today's technology that's out there, and that's been tapped, and so that's why you're seeing international expansion out of the first mover. So it's important for us to get out internationally with them, and it's important for us to achieve ubiquity in vegetables here. But I think the way we'll achieve ubiquity in vegetables is by focusing on the further development of the tech for broadacre. And so recently, really, that's what we've been talking about, is how the LNAser compares to the proposition of buying a John Deere, 616R sprayer, right? The $1 million plus looking beautiful machine, brandy new, 120 foot wide, See and Spray ultimate deal, the recurring revenue for them there, the increasing application of these herbicides. Do 2 passes or 3 turn into 3 or 4 in the coming years? Do the losses, bushels per acre, do those start to creep up year over year? And when you're looking at these deals and you're amortizing them over 5-7 years, you can make the case that the LNAser today, the modular technology that it is, offers a similar ROI. And so if we accelerate the pace at which we further develop it to make it even better and more attractive for broadacre crops, then I think that the inbound interest is going to happen naturally into specialty, because they're going to do what specialty always does and complain that they feel like an afterthought as far as agriculture is concerned to big broadacre crops. But in my experience personally, it's been that's their own fault, because I wanted nothing more than to work with specialty. And I've encountered so many bizarre situations where, in order for us to bring in our technology and perform the service, even at, the $200 per acre, which is preposterous, we would need to carry $150,000 a year fertilizer and chemical policy. And how is a small company like me supposed to afford $150,000 a year chemical and fertilizer policy when I'm not involved in chemicals or fertilizers. I'm trying to replace them and supplant them in a lot of ways, but that's not the sort of collaboration that you expect from somebody who truly has as big a problem as they say they do. And so you just have to go where the opportunity lies. It's not ill will. There's no grudge. It's just business. I understand people want to control what they think is very valuable. And in a lot of ways, we use that as motivation. We know what we have is special. We know the efficacy is there. And when we went to Salinas, the USDA research extension there, the UC Davis place in Salinas by the airport, the big takeaway for me was all of the growers and farmers and people in the know queuing in on the efficacy that we had against very large weeds. And that's owed to the special multimodal action of our laser tech. It's owed to the fact that we architected and built a purpose-built new laser itself for weeding and thinning crops, as opposed to taking commercially available lasers and slapping them on a toolbar. And that's so different. That's so different. And by exploiting the plant physiology, which our patents claim and get into, you can put a plant in a mutually exclusive state where it wants to transpire and evaporatively cool itself because this heat intensity hits it. But at the same time, the light intensity is also extraordinarily strong. And so it wants to close up. And that puts really the entire plant's physiology on the fritz. And what you'll see is chlorophyll absorbing 93% of that blue. And so it's extraordinarily efficient, our approach. And what ends up happening is the plant puts all of its energy and resources into repairing the damage that's been done by the horrific sunburn effectively. And while it does that, it becomes a zombie. It's quite stunted, and the crop will continue to grow until it occludes it, and then that's game over. And so really, laser weeding done right is quite underwhelming. And you need to dial it in to that threshold right before you burn it and cause that thermal damage that effectively cauterizes the wound, because you'll see that it's healthier for the plant. The weed can persist if you do that. But even if you don't hit the meristem and you're off on one of the leaves itself, you'll see the plant really struggle. And the time series, when we returned to Salinas and checked those plants, it was fascinating to see 6-inch tall stinging nettle that we'd hit, on a leaf to the side up high, and all of a sudden, all of the leaves are starting to curl up. They're shedding their waxy layer, and you're seeing it's in distress. And then they turn the irrigation off and disc up the field. So, it's fine, but I was so excited. I was excited for that reason to see what people loved about it, and I was also excited that we were pointed right at the Salinas Airport tarmac, and I can safely allude to that forever and always when anybody brings up the fact that we're in the visible spectrum and it's dangerous. I haven't gotten a call from the FAA, and our interventions and protection systems are clearly sufficient. So, again, that's no longer an objection in our eyes.
Some interviews, I feel like I have to be very active, make sure I got my next question dialed up. And some interviews, I just sit back, I drink my coffee, and I just soak it in and listen. And that was what we just did. We could go another half hour, and I'll just let you cook. Well, we do have to wrap it, Chris. As we wrap up, how can listeners get in touch and connect with you and LNA?
Well, our number and email is all on the website. I'm always accessible. You can get me on LinkedIn. I respond always. But what we have done is hosted people and growers and interested parties here at our headquarters up in Chico, and we've got a relationship with Northgate Aviation, and we've got growers that have flown their jets up here, and they come in, and you can walk from that jet port over to our research plot and our headquarters, and you get to see for yourself what a bootstrapped AgTech hardware success story looks like.
So Ty, what do you think of that conversation with Chris?
So good just sitting back and hearing what he has to say. And I love the contrarian thinking. There was some I agreed with, some I didn't agree with, but like in general, like we need more thoughtful people just asking good questions and building stuff. Like it's one thing to be on the sidelines and criticize, like people that are just like, oh, so-and-so is wrong, or this should be changed. but he's building a company. Like his money is where his mouth is, right? If he's bootstrapping a business, he's growing a business, he's seeing success, he's seeing traction, and he sees what is wrong in the industry that he would change or he would do differently. And he's doing it himself, right? So like you got to respect someone who is walking the walk.
Totally. Well, I think Chris is going to be at FIRA this week walking around. So if you see him, definitely say hi. I'll be there on Wednesday. So if you see me, let's have a cold brew. I'll be needing a cold brew.
Yeah, you guys, if you see Tim, give this poor sap, get him a coffee for heaven's sakes. Making the trip out to Woodland, California for some ag.
Oh, yeah.
As a new dad. Come on. I would like to see Tim get like 10 cold brews, people coming up and just gift him. That would be awesome.
That's a good aspirational cold brew number for Wednesday.
You've always seemed to be the more approachable brother at these type of industry events. You seem to get more people coming up to you, and people. I don't know if I come across as just not approachable. I don't know what it is.
We gotta work on that. It's the hair, yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you next week.